If a stranger followed you around for one full day and wrote down where your attention actually went, not where you say it goes, where it actually goes, you would not like what that piece of paper said. Most of it would not even be about your own life. Stop watching them. Start building you. That is the whole talk today. Everything else is detail. But let me back up because I want you to see exactly how I got there. Somebody asked me a question after a seminar once, a young man, 26 years old. He stood up and said, "Mr. Rohn, I spend so much time worrying about what my competitors are doing, what my family thinks, what my friends are achieving. How do I stop?" I looked at him and said, "You don't stop by trying harder to ignore them. You stop by giving your attention somewhere it actually belongs, to yourself." That is what today is really about. Not selfishness, not isolation, focus. Putting your attention on your own growth instead of spending it on everyone else's race. Here's what I have learned in 40 years of watching people build real lives. The ones who built something almost always did one thing. At some point, they stopped looking sideways and they started looking inward. Stay with me because I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like, exactly why it works, and exactly what it costs you when you don't do it. Let me ask you something direct. How much of your mental energy last week went to other people? Not helping them, not connecting with them, comparing yourself to them, wondering what they thought of you, measuring your life against theirs instead of measuring it against where you started. Be honest. The answer is probably more than you would like to admit. Here is why that matters. Attention is a resource. It is not infinite. What you feed it grows. What you starve it of shrinks. If most of your attention goes outward, to comparison, to gossip, to what the neighbor just bought, your own life starves. I knew a man named Ed. He ran a small hardware store. A big chain opened 20 minutes away. And for 2 years, every single conversation with Ed was about that chain store. What they were doing, how they undercut him, how unfair it was. 2 years of conversations. Do you know what Ed did not do in those 2 years? He did not improve his own store. He did not train his staff. He did not find what he could offer that the chain never would. Real service, local trust, the kind of relationship a small business builds. He spent his attention on them. His own business withered from neglect. Now stop. I am not talking about someone else right now. I am talking about you. Where has your attention been going? Let's be precise about what focusing on yourself actually means, because I do not want you walking out of here thinking this gives you permission to stop caring about anyone. It does not. I have met people who used focus on yourself as an excuse to become cold. That is not what built anybody's fortune. That is not what built anybody's character either. What I am describing is simpler. It is redirecting your default attention. The place your mind goes when nothing else is demanding it. From outward comparison to inward development. Let me give you a real one. History, not hearsay. Thomas Edison worked for years on the electric light bulb. Thousands of failed attempts. While he worked, other inventors were chasing the same prize. Some were faster in certain areas. Some got more press. For stretches, some looked like they might beat him to it. Edison did not track their progress and despair over it. He said he had not failed. He had found 10,000 ways that would not work. That is not a man looking sideways. That is a man locked onto his own workbench. Did he notice the competition? Of course he noticed. But noticing and obsessing are two different things. He gathered information the way a farmer checks the weather. Useful, not anxious. Then he went back to work. Information versus obsession. That is the whole difference. Here is a question worth sitting with. When you look at what someone else is doing, are you gathering information or are you feeding a comparison that drains you? Because those are two very different uses of the same 5 minutes. I want to give you a second history lesson here because one example is a coincidence, two is a pattern. Andrew Carnegie built one of the largest steel fortunes in American history. And here's something people forget about him. He did not spend his career watching the other steel men. He did not spend his mornings reading about what his rivals were building. He spent his attention on one thing, building the most efficient operation he possibly could, studying his own costs, studying his own processes, improving what was already his to improve. His competitors were doing their own thing. Some of them spent enormous energy worrying about Carnegie, watching him, reacting to him, trying to match him step for step. You know how that story ends. Carnegie's name is on concert halls and universities and libraries across this country. Most of his rivals are a footnote in someone else's biography. The lesson is not complicated. The man who focused on his own operation outbuilt the men who focused on him. Write that down if you need to, because it applies to more than steel. Now let me tell you about somebody closer to home, not a titan of industry, a woman named Rita, who ran a small bakery 2 blocks from where I used to live. Rita had a competitor open across town, fancier equipment, bigger marketing budget. For a while, it looked like Rita might lose everything. Here is what Rita did. She did not track her competitors' every move. She did not spend her mornings driving past their storefront to see how busy they were. She spent her mornings in her own kitchen, working on her own bread, talking to her own customers, learning what her own regulars actually wanted. 5 years later, the fancy bakery across town had closed. Rita's was still standing, because Rita spent 5 years building something. Her competitors' owners, I later learned, spent a good portion of those same years worrying about everyone else in town, instead of perfecting what was in front of them. Same pattern. Different century, different industry, same result. Now here is the mechanism behind all of this. Why comparison hurts you specifically. Comparison almost never measures like with like. You see their highlight reel. You compare it to your behind the scenes. You see 20 years of their skill. You compare it to your first year of effort. You see the outcome. You have no idea what the process cost them. Every person I have known who built something extraordinary had a season nobody saw. Early mornings, a first attempt that failed completely. Years of quiet, unglamorous progress before anything looked impressive from outside. Comparing your current chapter to somebody's highlight reel is not even the same kind of measurement. It is apples against a photograph of an orchard. Let me tell you about 2 brothers. I will call them Sam and Walter. Same parents, same upbringing, same modest furniture business handed to both of them. Walter spent his 20s watching Sam. Sam had an easier way with people. Sam got more attention from customers. Walter felt like he lived in Sam's shadow. So Walter tried to become Sam. More outgoing, more of a talker, more of a natural salesman. It never worked. Walter was not built that way. He was quiet, careful, detail-oriented, real strengths. But he spent so much energy trying to be his brother that he never built what he actually had. And here is the part people do not expect. Sam was not watching Walter at all. Sam was focused on getting better at what he did, learning the inventory, learning the suppliers, building his own skill day after day. 10 years later, Sam had built something real. Walter was still chasing a version of success that was never his to have, because it was never built on his own strengths. Stop with me for 1 second. Think of one person you compared yourself to in the last month. Just one. Now ask yourself honestly, has that comparison ever once produced a specific, useful action? Or has it only ever made you feel behind? Because most comparison does not motivate you. It paralyzes you. And motivation that paralyzes is not motivation. It is noise wearing ambition's clothes. There is a second brother story I want to tell you, because Walter is not the only version of this I have seen, and I think the variety matters here. I knew 2 sisters who ran competing dance studios in the same small city. Different studios, same city, same pool of students to draw from. The older sister spent her Tuesdays doing something specific. She would drive past the younger sister's studio, count the cars in the lot, and come home in a mood for the rest of the evening. Some weeks that mood lasted longer than one evening.
The younger sister never did this, not once, as far as I know. She spent her Tuesdays working on her own curriculum, trying new techniques with her own students, building relationships with her own parents and kids. Guess which studio is still open today? It is not the one that counted the cars. I tell you that story because I want you to see this is not a business principle only. It shows up in dance studios and furniture stores and steel mills and hardware stores and bakeries. Different rooms, same lesson every single time. Let me show you what this costs over time, because it is not a small cost. It compounds. Imagine 2 people starting the exact same job on the exact same day. Same skill, same opportunity. One of them spends an hour a day, every day, thinking about a coworker, what that coworker earns, what that coworker gets praised for, whether that coworker is ahead.
The other spends that same hour developing a skill, reading something useful, practicing something that matters for the work. 1 hour a day. That does not sound like much on day one, but run that forward 5 years. 1,800 hours, roughly, spent on comparison and worry. 1,800 hours, roughly, spent on skill and development for the other person. 1,800 hours is not a small number. That is most of a college education. That is enough hours to become genuinely excellent at something. One person spent it building nothing nothing but anxiety. The other built a skill nobody can take from them. Same starting line, same hour, completely different 5 years. That is the real cost of misplaced attention. It is not just a feeling. It is a bill you pay in lost development, 1 hour at a time, without ever seeing the invoice until years later. And here is what makes it worse. That bill does not arrive all at once. If it did, people would notice and change course immediately. It arrives one small charge at a time, so small each day that nobody feels it. That is exactly why it is dangerous. You do not go broke from one large loss. You go broke from 10,000 small ones you never bothered to track. Now, I want to be fair here, because I know somebody in this audience is thinking, Jim, some of that comparison time is unavoidable. We live in a world full of other people. You cannot seal yourself off completely. You are right, and I am not asking you to. I am asking you to notice the ratio. Nobody gets to 0% outward attention. That is not the goal. The goal is moving the ratio. If you are currently spending 60% of your free mental energy on comparison and 40% on building, I am asking you to flip that. Not eliminate the 60, flip it. Because even a modest shift in that ratio, held for years, changes the entire shape of a life. Let's talk about the daily practice, because a nice idea with no method is just entertainment. The first practice is the nightly inventory, every evening. Not once a week, every evening. Ask yourself 2 questions. What did I do today that moved me toward who I am trying to become? What did I do today that was really just someone else's business?
Be honest on the second one. Scrolling through other people's lives, conversations that were comparison sessions wearing the costume of catching up, time spent wondering if you measure up. You are not eliminating interest in other people. That would make you a poor friend. You are noticing the pattern. You cannot redirect what you refuse to notice. The second practice is building your own scoreboard. If you do not design your own game, you will end up playing somebody else's, and you will probably lose, because it was never built for your strengths. Walter played Sam's game. He would have won playing his own. What is your scoreboard? Not somebody's income, not somebody's title. What are the specific markers that match your actual goals, your actual values? Write them down, specifically. If you do not know what you are measuring, you will measure yourself against whatever is in front of you. And what is usually in front of you is somebody else's highlight reel. The third practice is the hardest one. Limit your intake of other people's business. I am not telling you to disappear from the world. I am telling you to be deliberate. How much of your daily attention goes to watching others versus building your own? There is an old proverb, the dogs bark, but the caravan moves on. There will always be noise, someone succeeding faster, someone with something you do not have. The caravan that stops every time a dog barks never arrives anywhere. Keep moving. That is the practice. And here is the part most people skip entirely. You are probably thinking something right now. I have heard this objection in enough rooms to know it is coming. Isn't some comparison useful? Doesn't it show me what is possible? Yes, it absolutely can.
There is a real difference between studying someone's method and comparing your worth to theirs. Studying makes you better. Comparing makes you smaller. Same observation, 2 completely different uses of it. Here is the test. After you watch someone else succeed, do you walk away with one specific action you can take, or do you walk away with a heavy, vague feeling of not being enough? If it is the first, that is study. Keep doing it. If it is the second, that is comparison. And it is costing you more than it gives you. I knew a real estate agent, sharp, hardworking. In the mid-1980s, she started attending the big regional conferences every year. And every year she came home discouraged. She would sit in the audience, listen to the top producers, and leave feeling years behind. I asked her what she did with what she learned at those conferences. Nothing. She admitted it plainly. No notes on technique. No new systems. Just the feeling of being behind, carried home like luggage. I told her, you are not going to learn. You are going to compare. And comparison without without application is just discouragement with a registration fee attached. She changed her approach. 3 specific questions before every conference. Notes only on techniques she could actually use. Nothing on how impressive the speaker seemed. Within a year, her business had grown. The information at those conferences never changed. Her relationship to it did. There is one more piece I want to give you, because knowing this and doing this are 2 different things, and I would rather leave you with both. Here is how you actually build the habit of focusing on yourself when the habit of comparing has been running for years. You do not fight it directly. Fighting a habit head-on rarely works. What works is replacement. Every time you notice your attention drifting towards someone else's business, and you will notice it because you are human, do not just tell yourself to stop. Redirect immediately to one specific question about your own progress. What is the next right step for me today in the direction I actually want to go? That question does 2 things at once. It interrupts the comparison, and it points your attention back where it belongs, in the same motion. Do this enough times, and the redirect becomes automatic. Not because you willed it into being automatic, because you practiced the redirect so many times that it became the new default. This is exactly how Edison worked. This is exactly how Carnegie worked. This is exactly how Rita worked in her small kitchen 2 blocks from my old house. This is exactly how the younger dance instructor worked, while her sister sat in a car counting license plates in a competitor's parking lot. Not because any of them never noticed the world around them, because the moment they noticed it, their trained response was to turn back toward their own work. That response was built through repetition, the same way any habit is built. You are not born focused on yourself. You practice your way there. One more thing before I close. People sometimes ask me how long this takes. How many days before the redirect becomes automatic instead of effortful? I do not have an exact number for you, and neither does anyone else who is being honest. What I can tell you is this. Every single person I have watched succeed at this practice noticed the same thing. The first few weeks were the hardest. The comparison habit was strong because it had been running unchallenged for years, sometimes decades. But somewhere between 1 and 3 months in, most people told me the redirect started to feel less like effort and more like instinct. That is not a guarantee. That is a pattern. And patterns are worth building your plan around. I want to add one final layer here because I think it matters. This practice does not stay the same difficulty level forever. It gets harder before it gets easier, and then it gets easier than you expected. Here's what I mean. The first 2 weeks, you will notice the comparison constantly, and redirecting will feel like effort every single time. Around week 3 or 4, something strange happens. You start to notice the comparison less often. Not because you are ignoring it, because your attention genuinely started drifting toward your own work by default, the way it used to drift toward everyone else's. That is the moment the habit has actually changed. Not when you can force the redirect, when you no longer need to force it because your attention is already home. Stay patient through the first month. That is where almost everyone quits. And it is exactly the point right before it gets easier. Let me bring this all the way home. Focus on yourself does not mean stop caring about others. It means stop measuring your worth by others. Hold on to that difference. It is the whole lesson today. Here is what I am asking you to do, starting tonight. Tonight, do the inventory. 2 questions. What moved me forward? What was just noise about somebody else's business? This week, write your own scoreboard. Specific, tied to your actual goals, not somebody else's highlight reel. And every time your attention drifts outward, ask the one question that separates study from comparison. What specific action can I take from what I just observed? If there is an answer, take it. If there is not, let it go. Bring your attention home, back to your own workbench, the way Edison kept returning to his. Back to your own operation, the way Carnegie kept building his. Back to your own kitchen, the way Rita kept baking hers. Back to your own studio, the way the younger sister kept teaching hers. Back to your own strengths, the way Sam built on his instead of chasing his brothers. Back to your own scoreboard, the way that agent finally learned to keep one. The caravan that stops every time a dog barks never arrives anywhere. Let the dogs bark. Keep your attention on your own road, your own pace, your own destination. Focus on yourself, not because the world does not matter, because your one life, the only one you were given to build something with, deserves more of your attention than anyone else's ever will. Bring your attention home. That is the whole lesson. Thank you.